we're going to do practice number 3 to improve your longevity, and really not necessarily your lifespan, but really your health span. So if you live a long life and you're sick and you can't do anything, that wouldn't be any fun. So health span. So this is practice number 3, and the one that you have the most control over, which is your diet. That's the most controllable factor that you really have in aging and how long you're going to live. So diet, what you put in your mouth, what kinds of things you keep out of your mouth can lead to a healthier and longer lifespan, as well as a health span. So there's tons of research on diet. The problem is most nutritional research is difficult to do. You don't really have randomized clinical trials. That would be difficult to do. You have to sequester people and you have to give them exactly what you want them to eat and make sure they eat it. And you have to do it over a certain amount of time, and then you have to extrapolate what that would do over a number of years. So nutritional research is typically difficult to do. So what they have been able to figure out, though, is that the last 50 years of recommendations from the USDA and the food pyramid have not led to a healthier America. So we have an uptick in type 2 diabetes, obesity, heart disease, cancer. Heart disease deaths have gone down because of the interventions that have impacted death from heart disease. But basically, chronic inflammation is one of the main reasons that people get sick. So inflammation, arthritis, autoimmune disease is on the rise, dementia, which is now known as type 3 diabetes. All of that's controlled by diet, partially, maybe not completely. But one of the biggies that they've been looking at recently is AMPK. So AMPK is adenosine monophosphate activated protein kinase. So it's known as AMPK. It's found in every cell in your body. And if you want to avoid the primary symptoms of aging, you need to maintain adequate AMPK levels, which decline fairly fast as you get older. Everything's on the teeter-totter with the fulcrum at 40. And once you hit 40 and you're not paying attention, things start going south. So AMPK, what does it do? It controls metabolic pathways. It helps metabolize food and then create the energy of the food, how you store that energy. So metabolizing with good AMPK levels, you're actually using the food you're eating. And as those levels decline, you start storing it for future use, which leads to fat formation and other problems. Or when it's activated, you can release further energy from the food that you're eating, fats and sugars, proteins. So activated AMPK gives you a lean and energetic, active body and helps with autophagy, renewing of cells, which occurs while you're sleeping. So autophagy while you're sleeping, cleaning up damaged parts of cells, renewing their energy stores. So AMPK activity, as it declines, your ability to perform that function of autophagy and renewing your cells declines. And that really declines with a decrease in AMPK and excessive caloric intake. So you can literally eat yourself to death if you're not paying attention. So how do you boost it? You can boost it through exercise, intermittent fasting, or time-restricted eating. Nobody likes the term fasting. So time-restricted eating, or what I just say is quit eating all the time. You don't need to be eating what the food pyramid says. Turn it upside down. Eat a couple of times a day and quit snacking, especially the bedtime snack. Talked to a guy yesterday who entered into a kind of a contract with me that he was really going to try to lose weight. And what he's done is quit his bedtime snacks. He got rid of beer, got rid of soda. He's trying to get his carbohydrate intake as low as possible. He's 2 weeks in. He's having some reflux symptoms, which is fairly typical, but he's lost 16 pounds in 2 weeks. So you can do it, and maybe you need a health coach to help you do it. So somebody like me. So if you're a sedentary person, which he's not, but he was eating too many carbs, so he wasn't using all of his energy, and he's about 58 years old, so his AMPK activity has declined. So high caloric intake drastically reduces AMPK. So growing masses of fat in your body, that reduces insulin sensitivity. You get insulin resistance, you get metabolic syndrome, if not type 2 diabetes. That increases system-wide inflammation, leading to chronic diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. So let's look at this a little closer. So this is from an article in Life Extension magazine. And Life Extension makes great supplements. I've used a lot of Life Extension products. You can find them in my full script dispensary, along with a whole batch of other really good companies. So this is from an article. They do their own research and create their own supplements based on that research. So AMPK, this is if it's ideal. So energy releasing processes, tissue, muscle, cardiac muscle, liver, adipose, fat tissue. So a optimal level, so think when you're younger, AMPK, glucose uptake, fat burning, new mitochondria. Mitochondria make ATP from the food you eat, adenosine triphosphate. And as ATP is used, you get adenosine monophosphate and diphosphate, and AMPK is working on adenosine monophosphate. So if you deplete all of your ATP, you're going to be using AMP, which is a less effective form of energy. And so AMPK declining reverses all of these things. So skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, glucose uptake, you need sugar for your heart muscle, fat burning, glucose burning, liver, all that. And then increased fat burning in fat tissue with optimal AMPK levels, energy storing from AMPK. So you are decreasing storage of fat in your liver and your fat tissue. And so if you don't use all of the carbohydrates, which are converted to glucose, if you don't use those because you're active, so think carb loading before heavy exercise or marathons, marathon runners usually carb load. If you're not using that, you're going to store it. And if you store it in your liver and your skeletal muscle, it can also be stored as glycogen. So if you need it rapidly, come back out of your liver, your muscle. But if your liver store is full, it's going to convert glucose to triglyceride and store it as fat. And then you start getting fat. So fat storage and release is decreased with AMPK. So you don't want to really store fat. You want to use the food that you are eating, right? And so for quick energy, carbohydrates by themselves are not bad. It's the type of carbohydrates that most people eat that causes the trouble. So let's look at what happens to the metabolic health. Lifestyle and genetic factors impairing AMPK activation. Okay, so you overeat, or your genetics play a part, not as much as environmental stuff. Inactivity, sedentary lifestyle. You get metabolic dysregulation, AMPK deficit, which leads to insulin resistance, higher fasting blood sugar, inflammation. Blood sugar is, not unused blood sugar is inflammatory. And that leads to all these diseases. Type 2 diabetes, not type 1, that's a different deal. Hypertension, high blood pressure, certain cancers, and that's a whole nother video. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. This used to be always from alcohol, and this is epidemic. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, NAFLD, is rampant, and it's been rampant now for 20 years. It just keeps getting worse. I mean, you're seeing teenagers with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and you can't just look at a person and say, ooh, they're overweight, so they've got fatty liver. I've talked to and seen people send me their lab results looking for fatty liver who are lean, they look normal, they're normal weight, but they have fatty liver disease. They just haven't, maybe they're not old enough to get all of the AMPK decrease and dysregulation with accumulation of body fat. Polycystic ovarian syndrome, one of those things that every reproductive endocrinology fellow tries to explain and has not been able to do that. It is a syndrome of overproduction of male hormones in women, but it's really from insulin resistance. Those women tend to be type 2 diabetics. They have estrogen dominance. They have lack of progesterone. They tend to be infertile. They have menstrual irregularity. It's a whole gamut of difficulties, and a syndrome of insulin resistance is the starting factor potentially. There is a genetic component as well. Alzheimer's dementia, type 3 diabetes is the newest term for Alzheimer's dementia. Dyslipidemia, and then atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. Specifically, this one would be high triglyceride to HDL ratio, which is kind of the marker. It's your triglycerides, not your LDL, not your total cholesterol. It's triglyceride level divided by HDL, ideally under 1. Average risk of heart disease under 3, but we see people all the time with ratios of 5, 6, 7. And atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, notice they have nothing about cholesterol in here at all. They're not talking about cholesterol and atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. They're talking about AMPK deficits and insulin resistance, which can lead to all these metabolic problems. So let's move on to blood sugar. They affect the brain. They're implicated as a major player in Alzheimer's dementia, other types of dementia, and neurodegeneration. So research in the journal Neurology, new data that modest increases of blood sugar in people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s can have a negative effect on memory. And this is even for a short period of time. So if you're not utilizing the carbohydrates converted to glucose and storing them, then even a short period of time can damage your memory. So if a person's A1C, hemoglobin A1C common test showing an average blood sugar control and levels over a 3-month period goes from 5% in the normal range to just 5.6%. 5.7% is metabolic syndrome if you have high blood pressure and some other things. So 5 to 5.6% shows worsening memory recall. Type 2 diabetes is diagnosed with a hemoglobin A1C of 6.5. And hemoglobin A1C doesn't really tell you the whole story. You have to have a fasting insulin level to really put it all together. So your hemoglobin A1C can be normal, and you can still be insulin resistant or developing that if your fasting insulin level is around 8. Ideally, it's under 4. In the lab, the normal range is all the way up to 18.1 in Quest, up to 20 in textbooks. That's all considered normal. But you're developing insulin resistance, and you're headed toward that metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes range of problems. So increases in blood sugar, short periods of time, or chronically elevated blood sugar increases inflammation, increases one's susceptibility to chronic disease, autoimmune disease. So really, what you need to do is keep your blood sugar in the low end of a healthy range using your diet. So reduce your carbohydrates, sugar, refined, processed, ultra-processed foods. Exercise, which was number 2 longevity practice, and then intermittent fasting. And then there's been some discussion about using continuous glucose monitors on people that are not type 2 diabetics. There are people that are doing that. That's not cheap. It's a monthly subscription, not covered by insurance unless you're diabetic, but they're on the market. They're small. They attach to the skin of the arm, the abdomen. There's a small sensor that measures glucose, and then an app in your phone that can read sugar measurements and tracks glucose patterns over a 24-hour period of time, which you can do so that you eat. You can see what your blood sugar does. They're only available through prescription-ish. You can find them. It's an excellent way of measuring blood sugar, monitoring blood sugar, discovering which foods trigger an insulin spike and a rise in blood sugar. So hopefully, depending on who you read, that will be available just for people that want to monitor how they're doing in the general public, and may help people lose weight and increase their longevity. So that is longevity practice number 3. We've got 9. So I'll be back soon, and have a great day. Talk to you later. Bye. eat your steak. It's behind me.